While I understand that this video topic is something that's a little bit outdated if you have been scrolling around on Twitter, I still wanted to make a video about this and target both the Canadiens and the Senators fans because, hey, it's the off-season. We have nothing really else to talk about, so why not go over some comparisons here? So, we're going over onto a conversation sparked up on Reddit, and it pretty much sums up the entire conversation we're going to be having here. We're talking about Montreal Canadiens forward Nick Suzuki, as well as Ottawa Senators forward Josh Norris. The reason we're highlighting both of these guys is because they're both following some pretty similar career paths, and it's kind of funny to take a look at the direct correlation that both of these guys have exhibited the past few years. So, just going over the profiles of both of these guys before we dive into our discussion on Reddit. Nick Suzuki, 2017 guy, center, 5'11", 205, signed to an 8-year deal till the end of 2030, making $7.875 million a season. Josh Norris, 2017 guy, a center, 6'2", 192, so a bit bigger than Nick Suzuki. He is also signed to an 8-year deal to the end of 2030, this time at $7.95 AAV. Both of these guys are centers taken in 2017, signed till 2030, making just under $8 million apiece. And for Nick Suzuki, you have yourselves a player who had 61 points in 82 games played this recent season with the Montreal Canadiens. He was one of, if not the absolute best Canadian player this season, as he led the team in points with his 61 marker. Josh Norris, on the other hand, was one of the best Ottawa Senators players this year. He didn't lead the team in points, but his 55 points in 66 games played was good enough to really best out Nick Suzuki's overall point per game on the season. Norris had 35 goals and 20 assists in the 66-game campaign, and if you do the math over 82, 35 divided by 66 multiplied out by the full season, he would have been on pace for 43 goals, which is pretty nutty, as well as 68 total points. So if you're taking a look at just the direct one-to-one numbers here, Josh Norris did have a better season in 21-22 comparative to Nick Suzuki, although Suzuki was on a much inferior team. He was the number 1 point scorer on his team. Norris was third behind Tkachuk and Tim Stützle. Let's go over onto the Reddit post here by Interesting Shake 97 on the R Hockey subreddit. If you've been on Twitter the last few hours, the Suzuki-Norris debate has probably been on your timeline. So I was wondering what fans of other teams thought. Sens and Habs fans will still vote, but it's worth a try, LMAO. Which center would you rather have on your team? Nick Suzuki had a full 82-game season pace of 60 points in 2020-2021 and 61 points in 2021-2022. He is known for his strong two-way game and playmaking. There are worries of his ability to keep progressing offensively without sacrificing his defensive play. For Josh Norris, he had an 82-game pace of 51 points last year and 68 points this previous season. He's known for his power play prowess and his shot. There are some worries about his unsustainable shooting percentage, which, as we're going to note in the video, he had like a 20% shooting percentage this year, which is insane. And if you go over to the Reddit votes, you could actually see there are, 3,600 votes in total in terms of the Norris versus Suzuki thing. Now, you might go out there and say, hey, Norris had a lot more points, he scored a lot more goals. You could say that the ability to score goals as consistently as Norris has done, albeit in a pretty unsustainable shooting percentage kind of way, that's really valuable, so it could definitely make sense if you're choosing Norris over Suzuki, right? Well, if you go over to the results, out of these 3,600 votes, 2.3k of them are actually going for Nick Suzuki, who did have fewer points and who was a more well-rounded type of player. Now, this is an assessment that totally makes sense. If you go over to the comments and see what fans have to say, is there a Suzuki award? Didn't think so. Case closed. Okay, no, that's kind of a meme. We're gonna ignore that. I think this comment over here from OKFix6342 sums it up pretty nicely. Tough to pick one because they're very close. Norris had a good year on a bad team, but benefited from playing with better players and a higher shooting percentage, and he grew a lot from the previous season. Suzuki had a good year on a bad team with little help from their wingers, with the exception of Caulfield near the end of the season, and he didn't improve much offensively. I watch Suzuki more this year, and because of the steadiness he gives to his team, he is the better bet in my books. He also comes in at a slightly cheaper cap hit. I think it's also important to note that Suzuki didn't really take off until later in the year, and once Ducharme was fired, his play really jumped. Then, the next reply from the Raft man is, Suzuki was still our best player when that hockey terrorist known as Dominic Ducharme was our head coach. That's what I was talking about in the previous video, man. Hockey terrorist, quote-unquote. Such an inappropriate nickname, but man, is it thrown around a lot. But if you're going over my personal opinion, I definitely do think there's a lot to gain if you go with either of these guys heading into the long-term future. Their cap hits are pretty equal, their ages are pretty equal, their position is the same. They're in a pretty similar boat here, which is kind of funny because you don't normally see players this close in terms of the comparables this early on in their careers. But for Nick Suzuki, I definitely do agree with a lot of the assessment that he is just a lot more of a stable guy that can do pretty good things everywhere on the ice, even if he's not going out there and producing points. Norris, as we had noted, had a 20% shooting percentage this season, and he's got an 18% shooting percentage in his entire NHL career. I don't know about you, but I think that's pretty unsustainable, man. Like, you take a look at some of the better goal scorers in the NHL, Steven Stamkos at 16% or whatever it is, Ovechkin with 12. Here's a point that I saw on the Canadiens subreddit that kind of highlights the intricacies beyond shooting percentage. 20% is really high. For context, Austin Matthews is at 16% in his career. Ovi is just over 12. Pastrnak is at 14. Whoever else you want to name, you can feel free to look up. If Josh Norris shoots at 20% for his career, he'll probably win multiple Maurice Richard trophies and be in the Hall of Fame with 500 plus goals. It's possible, I guess, but I'm kind of skeptical, especially considering almost half his goals were on the power play. Here is another comment on the Canadian subreddit from GoHabsGo1999. Nick Suzuki had 38 even strength points, Josh Norris had 32. Nick Suzuki had a PDO of 97.9%, which is unlucky, and Josh Norris's PDO number was at 101.9, which is lucky. Nick Suzuki started 55.5% of his shifts in the offensive zone. Norris had an absurd 65.1% of his shifts start out in the O zone, which makes it easier for Norris to rack up points. Despite the vast gap in zone starts, they racked up similar relative Fenwick percentage, meaning Suzuki was better at transitioning the puck up the ice. Combined with the fact that Suzuki spent large parts of the season with actual AHL caliber wingers and had an actual terrorist coaching him, there it is again, I think it's fair to say Suzuki is clear. Now, I think we're all kind of sort of feeling the same type of conclusion here, but I think this comment here from GrayBlack75 highlights the ultimate differences in the best way out of all the comments that we have read so far. I think Norris is the more dynamic player. He's got better feet, better hands, and a better shot. He's more of a sniper on the power play, and he has shown that he can consistently finish at a high rate. He's also a driver on a better, arguably much better team, which I think is important. He's not just a passenger with talented line mates, he actually makes them better as well, but he also benefits from playing with better players who either bear his passes or get him the puck in high danger areas. This circumstance is particularly true in the power play, where talent probably shines the brightest. Suzuki is a better playmaker and a better player at even strength. He's more of a prototypical two-way center with good defensive acumen and a higher dose of defensive zone starts. I'd argue he also has a little more sandpaper and grit and is a proven playoff performer, an undetermined facet of Norris's game as he's never had the opportunity to play in the postseason. He plays on a much worse team where, at least this past season, his only teammate with high offensive potential was Caulfield. We'll see if Slafkovsky can emerge as a second option. At this stage of their careers, if I want all offense, I go Norris. You can't deny the dynamism that he displays. If I want reliability, steadiness, and playoff consistency, I lean Suzuki. And so, this is a pretty fun conversation topic to have. I actually tried to look for the Ottawa Senators' primary response to this because I get it, we read from the Canadian subreddit and we saw what they had to say about this entire thing, but on the Sens sub, they didn't even have a post made for this. I also tried to look for Senators' opinions on Twitter, but I wasn't really able to find it because this debate was actually from a few days ago, so yeah, I guess that's my consequence for covering this a little bit later, but either way, the debate rages on. I definitely do want to see your comments about this entire thing. Nick Suzuki versus Josh Norris. Who is the better player today? Who will be the better player in 10 years? Who will have the better career? If you were trying to build a team from scratch and you had these two guys at their cap hits at under $8 million, each at 22, 23 years old, drafted in 2017, who do you lean more towards? Nick Suzuki of the Canadiens or Josh Norris of the Ottawa Senators? Talk to me in the comments all your thoughts about this debate. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.